As a film major in my undergraduate work and a lifelong toy collector, pop culture has always been a very important part of my life. In fact, I'm usually hesitant to get into something new because I have so much I'm into. But what about when there's too much? Now, what do I mean by too much pop culture? Well, what happens when they make sequels to things that you love that kind of ruins the original? I mean, I'm a big fan of The Matrix, and yes, I do like Matrix 2 and 3, but wow, Matrix 4? I don't think I've ever had so much trouble getting through a movie in my entire life. It was like just, you know, well, kind of remember that scene on Airplane where everyone is trying to kill themselves because they don't have to sit next to Ted Stryker? When I was a kid, watching Star Wars on VHS was one of my favorite things to do. And yeah, while there were other Star Wars contents like the Ewok Adventure and things that weren't spectacular, no one's looking at the holiday special, those original three films were my childhood. And well, I mean, I bought them several times. I bought them when new footage would be added. I'd buy them when new graphics would be added to the outside of the box. But then when Disney decided to buy Star Wars in 14, 15, and push out more movies, well, not only obviously does it have a lot of confusion with the timeline, but now you have overall more content. Let's actually roll back a little bit. Looking at the total number of Star Wars movies and content that's out, there's less good stuff, if you will. Now, one of the reasons that it's good to put stuff out in a linear fashion is for retailers, because retailers have a very hard time understanding continuity when it's out of order. But the other big issue is when content is diluted, meaning there's so much of it that there's more bad than good. I mean, Star Wars is probably one of the best examples, right? Again, when you had three movies that are all pretty, well, maybe not perfect. Return of the Jedi has some issues, but, more or less, Episode 4, 5, and 6 are considered some of the best films. All three of them are good. So 100% of Star Wars was fantastic. Again, not counting the holiday special and the Ewok Adventure. But yeah, throughout the 80s, you had three movies. Then along comes the prequels. They were okay. I think most of us agree on that, but they weren't as good as the originals. So now, instead of having three movies, you have six. And with three of them being so-so, well, now 50% of your content is good instead of 100% of your content. See where I'm going here? The more that's put out, the more it dilutes the IP. So now that Disney has come along and put out three more movies, well, I think most people can agree that those three are not as good as the prequels or the original trilogy. So now only 33% of your content is good. So we've really taken a huge step back from when we had three great movies. And obviously, it's not just Star Wars that this happens to. And the more and more content that's put out there, the more risk you have that some of it's not going to be as wonderful. I mean, gosh, what happened to Indiana Jones is heartbreaking. Again, we had three 100% great movies in the 80s. And now we have five movies where two of them are not very good, which means the overall amount of Indiana Jones isn't as good. I love it when there is a finite amount of content. Books are great with this. Book series like, the Master and Commander series, which also was a movie. Granted, they didn't get a sequel, but that's a whole other YouTube video. But yeah, there is a finite number of Captain Aubrey books. And you can read all 20 of them and enjoy the finite story. Some of them are better than others, but it's a complete canon. Now, with so much more content, what do you be a fan of? I mean, if you're a fan of C-3PO, well, when you were a kid, this is what C-3PO looked like. Now that we have so much Star Wars content, C-3PO has multiple different forms, different colors of legs and plating, or, no plating at all, which means that there is more content to like, but a bigger risk that some of it's not going to be good. So why don't studios and artists and content creators know when to walk away? Why don't they say, hey, I've got something successful, I'm so lucky? Why do they do it? Why do they keep going to the same well over and over again, producing content, sequels, and unlimited amount of, well, just not very good content? And a big part of it is because creating content is a huge bet, a huge risk. In fact, you have a much bigger risk of losing than winning. It's why things like Ghostbusters is a property that Sony keeps going back to over and over again. Why do they do this? Because there is an established Ghostbusters fan base. Yeah, they may put out content that's not great, but the risk of trying something completely original, a content that doesn't have anything to back it up, is very risky. It's the same reason why when you're adapting a book as a movie, you will look for an existing hit book that has an audience, because you know that audience will make up a dedicated ticket holder. But as we get more and more content created for different, stories that we love, I mean, gosh, wasn't Die Hard better when there was one? I mean, by like the last Die Hard movie, Bruce Willis's character was basically like a cyborg, long way from the everyday man that he was in the first Die Hard. He's almost become unrecognizable. Another interesting example is what happened with the Justice League movie. So yeah, we've obviously had a lot of Batman content and DC content, but this movie was pushed out because if it didn't hit theaters by a certain date, well, there was going to be problems in superhero world because the executives weren't going to make their bonus over at Warner Brothers. So a perfect example of content being created without thinking of how the audience was going to react, but they just put it out there so that executives could make their bonus. So follow the money. If there's money to be made for a studio or a toy making company or TV, they're going to pursue it because it's a safer bet than trying something completely new. The last example I want to use is the Punisher basically situation. I was in a meeting once where Marvel was talking about all of the characters they loved and how great they were for toys and merchandise, and the executive said, and someone we really love is the Punisher. And he said, well, do you know why we love the Punisher? Because he sells merchandise. He had no idea who the Punisher was. I asked him, I didn't know you liked Frank Castle. He said to me, who's Frank Castle? So yeah, if it sells and makes money, it's worth the risk. And that tends to be why there's so much content out there and why it's diluting our childhoods. What do you guys think? Are there sequels that have come out for movies that you just wish did not exist because you liked it better when there was less content? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, thank you for watching. Thank you for sharing. It's the best way to support this channel. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you guys in the next one.